The prison officers are like a pack of rabid dogs, pouncing on us, torturing us, treating us with no dignity. They insult and make threats of rape to our women. Are these guards really Iraqis? How can they do this to their own people? Testimony of an Iraqi prisoner in Tikrit. The Brussels Tribunal.
Welcome back to Inside Iraq. We are discussing the explosive subject of torture in Iraqi prisons with Mohammed Ihsan, Faridoon Hilmi, and now we are joined from Washington by Dr. Laith Kubba, who was the spokesman for the Iraqi government. Laith Kubba, let us talk about responsibility. No government I know espouses publicly that torture is part of its policy. And yet, the government, whether it's the president or prime minister or ministers, they should respect the intelligence of people when they say torture is not carried out in our country. You were a spokesman for the Iraqi government. You knew it was going on. To what extent there is a responsibility and through the knowledge of the prime minister that he should be accountable for it?
Let me give you my insight and analysis of what went wrong and what is going wrong. The essence of the problem, we do not have an independent, strong judiciary in Iraq. We do not have an independent institutions of the rule of law. If we do have that, then you subject the executive branch of the government, the cabinet, starting from the president, the prime minister, the ministers, they must be subjected to the judiciary, to the rule of law, to courts. And there must be strong agencies that follow up on these issues. What we have in Iraq, which is typical what you see in many third world countries, is a weak judiciary that is subject to the influence of the executive branch. We have a double trouble here in Iraq, and that is the executive branch itself, the cabinet, the ministers, it is divided between many political groups and parties. Many of them compete against each other. My assessment, the real problem is structural, it's institutional. So long as you do not bring officials to court, so long as you do not punish those, irrespective whether it's the president, the prime minister, or a minister, so long as people get away with these violations, they will continue. And the reason they get away with it, because the way the country is structured at the moment, we have a subservient, weak judiciary, not an independent judiciary, and independent law enforcement agencies.
Faridoon Hilmi, that explains the fact that not a single official from the security services is serving time behind bars, given the fact that many lawsuits they have been lodged, whether in Baghdad or in Basra or other places, against security officers as well as some of the ministries. So where does one go for remedy?
That doesn't explain what's going on. The fact is that you have a bunch of people who have created a system to suit their will and whim, to suit their own agenda. And now we're saying, oh, well, if you had a good system, then those people will not be able to take everything into their own hands and do as they please. Well, the fact is that the system was created by them. So you've got the chicken and egg situation here. What explains the fact that nobody has been accounted for is because the people who are torturing and doing the killing are the same people who are working for the ones who are telling them to do so, who are the government, the people who came with the occupiers. So this is the Achilles heel of the political situation in Iraq, and you can't explain it otherwise.
Mohammed Ihsan, since you absolutely do not agree with torture and you condemn in the most vigorous way human rights abuse in Iraq, wouldn't be the next step is to bring to justice those who are responsible for carrying it out?
I hope so. But I think what's going on in Iraq, I agree with a lot of things been mentioned by Dr. Kubba. There is no independent institutions. The rule of law, it's still building toward that direction. As I said at the beginning of the program, Iraq is at war with itself, with neighboring countries, interference, and also there is international terrorist war inside Iraq as well. All these excuses or all these factors all together not helping the authority to take serious measures because they were part of abuses and they are not up to level to control themselves and stop abuser from what they are doing.
Let me
inside
beg
the
to differ
prison
with you,
in
Mohammed
Baghdad
Ihsan,
and
because we
Basra.
saw a couple of incidents, Laith Kubba. I don't know whether it was during your time or not. Actually, ministers vying with each other, jumping on each ministers and grabbing people and putting them in dungeons and torturing them. And then they squabble about the numbers. No, 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 I did not torture 270. I only tortured 70 people. In any self-respecting democracy, those people, they would end up behind bars, and yet nothing happened to them. As a matter of fact, one of them has been shifted from the Ministry of Interior and became the Minister of
Finance. Jassim, if I may, initially I gave a diagnosis of what the problem is. Now, what can be done about it? Actually, it's a lot. Nobody suggests that we simply should wait and accept this lot and what happens. Iraq is a signatory of many international agreements, and I think if we have stronger groups arguing for the application of these agreements, for the rule of law, whether they chase it within Iraqi courts or within international courts, whether the violators are Iraqis or Americans, it makes no difference. If there is a violation, it needs to be chased. And what is, I think, lacking, generally speaking, amongst Iraqis, we just do not believe that if you chase a case in an international court, it's worth the effort. Nothing will happen. There is a state of apathy. And I do believe it has worked in many other countries, and it can work in Iraq. And I argue strongly it should be held not only against Iraqis, even against Americans who violated the law while they were in Iraq.
One of the reasons normally given for Faridoon Hilmi for carrying out torture is that the only way we can stop the regime from crumbling and tumbling is by carrying out torture. We have no other alternative. Those people, they would not come out and give the information. Would that justify carrying it out?
Yeah. That doesn't justify it, but that is the truth. That is a fact that this government has no real backing and has to resort to measures worse than Saddam's measures to stay in power. What the other two gentlemen are actually advocating, first of all, they're saying there are no institutions, independent institutions. Of course there aren't. And for 6 years, nobody's bothered to do them. That's because the government doesn't want those institutions. And secondly, I think they are actually saying that the only way to do something about this is another invasion, so that you can get rid of this lot and maybe bring another lot that believes in democracy, human rights, and does not believe in torture, which is the nonsensical part of it. It's back to square one.
One invasion is more than enough for Faridoon Hilmi. Let me go to the final questions to Mohammed Ihsan. The world, as well as the Iraqi government, condemned the Bush administration and, for that matter, the United States for the Abu Ghraib scandal. Now torture in Iraq has become endemic and systematic, and apparently there is no end to it. Why is that the Iraqi government is silent about this? Al-Maliki talks about rebuilding, about national reconciliation, about investment. He talks about anything under the sun. But does he talk about torture carried out by his officials? No, absolutely not. Why is that?
I am not a defender of Maliki government or a spokesman of Iraqi government at all. But I've heard from different authorities or different ministers in the government, mainly Minister of Human Rights in Iraqi government. She expressed to me that they are doing their best to stop it, but still they cannot, because the government is not functioning as a government in all institutions. There is a lot of areas, some area inside Baghdad is out of the control of the government, of the central government. But I don't know what's the reason behind it. We have to acknowledge that there is a tortures, and we have to acknowledge there is human rights abuses in Iraq if we want to go ahead and improve the situation in the country. That's my policy, and that's what I believe in it.
Final question to Laith Kubba. Does the Iraqi government has the spine and the moral commitment to end torture in all of Iraq?
I do believe there are many decent people within the government, and the majority of Iraqi people are decent. But for a number of reasons, there is no time for it in this program, why we ended up in that position. Everybody acknowledges nobody deliberately pushes a policy of torture in Iraq. I do not believe that. But I do believe the way power is distributed and structured with no checks and balances, no rule of law, allows for that torture to happen and for criminals to get away with it. It happens in police stations, it happens at other levels. In the same way, corruption now is widespread in Iraq and there are no checks and balances. But it doesn't happen with a magic stick. It's not like one day we have it all and next day we don't have any of it. We have to fight it, and we have to build institutions that will replace it. Don't forget, it was only yesterday Obama spoke about torture during the Bush era, and he condemned those tactics, and he actually adopted totally different policies. This is happening in a country that has very well established rule of law within its borders, and you do see follow-up and checks and balances. So any country to perfect its practices, it has to go through a long road. And as I said, I absolutely do not make excuses for anybody, but I do believe it's not about persons. You replace one government with the other and the problem is gone. It is about people like you and me working towards that end.
We just have to wait for an Iraqi Obama. Laith Kubba, Mohammed Ihsan, Faridoon Hilmi. Gentlemen, thank you for being guests on Inside Iraq. To access the show and to send us your comments, please go to aljazeera.net/English. We have reached the end of this show. Join me next week when we take another look inside Iraq. Until then, have a great week.